All right, let's talk some awards. Why don't we? Listen, a lot's going to get made over who deserves All Pro, who doesn't deserve All Pro, who deserves MVP, who doesn't deserve MVP. Well, for me, I like to give my opinions on this stuff as well. Actually, Kyle had the idea on the podcast for us to give it, and once I compiled my list, figured, hey, this would make a good video. So I'm gonna make a video of it. I already have given out my initial thoughts on the podcast, so it's at the end of the podcast if you want to check that out. Or you can just sit here and watch this one. Let's get into, first, I'm going to give my picks for who deserves to be on the All-Pro team, and then I'm going to give my picks for all of the awards. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, and MVP. Let's just get into it. First, for all pros, let's do pass catchers or weapons in general, whatever you want to call them. Christian McCaffrey, I think, is kind of the obvious pick for running back. There's some other guys who have had good seasons, but to me, he's the guy. Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb as the two wide receivers, but I also threw in Amon-Ra St. Brown into flex position. Amon-Ra, I believe, was not named a Pro Bowler. He's not the only non-Pro Bowler to make this list. Kittle, he was the one tight end. There was no one I really even strongly considered outside of that. A couple of receivers you could have considered, like A.J. Brown for a second, definitely kind of sucks to leave him off the list. I believe Kyle had him on his list, but to me, these feel like the five. As for offensive linemen, which is what we're all here to talk about, this is the position grouping that we need to talk about. From left to right, Trent Williams, Joe Thuney, Frank Ragnow, Chris Lindstrom, and Penei Sewell. Chris Lindstrom, I gotta pat myself on the back a little bit here. I was someone who was very high on Chris Lindstrom right away. Big fan of Chris Lindstrom from the start. The issue is that having a good right guard take, just no one really cares about. But he's a great player, and a couple other guys that probably would have made the list. If I just did two guards instead of a left guard and a right guard, Thuney probably doesn't make the list. The left guard was actually a bit tough to figure out exactly who I wanted to give it to. Decided to go with the player for Kansas City who's he's still had a really good year, really good player. Trent Williams has missed a little bit of time. I just think that what he's done, even with that little bit of time he's missed, is good enough for him to still get the All-Pro. Penei Sewell's been awesome this year, and Frank Ragnow, and they could have had another player, another player I considered for them. So, a lot of good stuff. I would say 2 first-team All-Pros, and if I did a second team, they would have someone on the list as well. So, good stuff there by the Lions. Heading over to defense for the edge, we're doing defensive line right now. For the edge, TJ Watt and Myles Garrett kind of feel like they have to be the two. I did consider Nick Bosa. I did consider Micah Parsons, but they're not TJ Watt or Myles Garrett. They're not. So those two guys definitely are going to be the two guys that get talked about in terms of the defensive player of the year. Ballas, I believe Myles Garrett, kind of his advanced stats are a little bit better, but TJ Watt has the sacks, which has been the story of those two guys' career, right? Which do you value more? I'll let you decide. I'll give you my defensive player of the year pick in a minute. But for the interior, there's a couple guys. Leaving Quinnen Williams and Dexter Lawrence off this list sucks. What came down to his snaps, though, Aaron Donald has about 200 more snaps than Dexter Lawrence, so I decided to go with him instead. I do pay attention to how much you've played, and Derek Brown, with how much he's played this season. The stat that, again, this isn't why he's on my list, because I don't really think it is an impactful stat, but just kind of a weird stat that happened is he somehow had 100 tackles this season as an interior defensive lineman. I don't get how that's possible. I don't get how that happened. That probably is just more scheme than anything else. But on top of that, he's had a great season. He's been fantastic for Carolina and a really underrated player. So those two guys, I am still giving my my nod to, even if they're maybe not the guys getting the most attention as of right now. I think they deserve it. For off-ball linebackers, only 2 spots available. What I did was I did a flex position for the kind of the extra defensive players. So I believe the All-Pro just straight up has 3 linebackers there, but to me that's not really how that usually works. So because usually you only have 2 linebackers now, so I wanted to create it more similar to how teams play. So I put a flex spot in there, which does not have to be a linebacker. But Fred Warner and another non-Pro Bowler, Demario Davis, make the list. I think Fred Warner is kind of a lock. He's going to be on everyone's ballot. But Demario Davis has been great for New Orleans. He does not get enough credit. He's an incredible player. And again, a lot of good linebackers. Leaving Roquan off the list sucks, but I think Davis has been better. I just do. Finally, defensive backs. This rounds out the All-Pro. Kyle Hamilton is going to be my flex. It's a little bit out of order, but the corners, Jalen Johnson and Deron Bland, and then the safeties, Antoine Winfield Jr. and Jesse Bates III. Winfield Jr. and Jesse Bates kind of just have to be on the All-Pro team, I think. For Hamilton, he missed a couple of games, so if I only went with two safeties, I would have left him off the list. But given the fact that Hamilton's done so much in the, 14, 15 games he played, he still absolutely has to be the flex spot, in my opinion. Sauce Gardner probably would have been number 3 on the cornerback chart if I did 3. Maybe that's who who Hamilton was competing with for the flex spot, right? But I went with Jalen Johnson and Deron Bland. I think Deron Bland's had a really underrated season, actually. He's gotten plenty of attention due to the pick sixes, but usually people look at that and say, wow, crazy this guy's happened to get a lot of pick sixes. There's a subsect of football fans don't realize that turnovers are fluky and are just convinced that he's a superstar. But I think that everyone else maybe has kind of looked past the interceptions and interceptions, those are fluky. But he's actually played really well, really good coverage outside of the interceptions. And that's why I'm kind of pounding the table for him a little bit. I do think he's had an all-pro caliber season. And how crazy is it that Trevon Diggs got injured and they replaced him with a better corner, basically. It's insane. And I like Diggs as a corner. I'm a Diggs defender, although I haven't always been. Also, Jalen Johnson, he's just been incredible for Chicago. A superstar in the making, and he's going to get a lot of attention, in future years if it doesn't come this year. So definitely deserves to make the list, in my opinion. Moving on to awards for Rookies of the Year, I'm going with multiple Rams players here. Kobe Turner and Puka Nacua. So Rams, what a draft they had. And, again, I'm just making this video to brag, basically, because when I did my 7 winners of the NFL draft, I put the Rams on there, and some people were a little surprised. What do you mean, the Rams? They didn't even have I don't think they had a first or second round pick. Definitely didn't. Or no, they had a second round pick, but they didn't have a first round pick. But they had 14 overall selections and just drafted a lot of interesting players with those selections. So while I wasn't like, oh, they're probably going to have defensive and offensive rookie of the year on there, obviously, they did a lot really well. Again, because neither one of these guys were high draft picks, a lot of times it doesn't get you the award. The reality is that for someone like Jalen Carter, he had people pounding the table saying you should draft him, and now they kind of want to seem smart, so they're going to say he should be defensive rookie of the year, right? That's just how it works. And let's just be honest, a lot of people don't watch all the games that are voting on this stuff, so that's another factor. Kobe Turner was someone who wasn't really on my radar until a few weeks ago, to be honest. I knew he had a lot of sacks, but I was kind of like, yeah, okay. Every now and then one of these young players gets a handful of sacks, but they weren't really earned. And then because of that, that fan base loses their minds, but then they end up not actually being, not amounting for much. So I assumed that was the case of Turner, but then I looked into it and I saw his advanced numbers were really good. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe this guy's actually got something, but he is playing next to Aaron Donald, gets favorable matchups, right? That's not really the case either, because what the Rams try and do is they try and make sure that they can get Aaron Donald as many one-on-one matchups as possible. So Turner actually has been double-teamed more than Aaron Donald this season. Despite that, put up a great advanced numbers, put up just great numbers in general, has a high sack count, and while Jalen Carter's been very good as well, I think Turner's been a little bit better and played more than Carter. That's another thing. He's had more snaps. So yeah, give me Turner, and then Puka Nacua. Again, I don't believe the offensive rookie of the year should just go to a quarterback, right? I know my MVP take is they should go to a quarterback, but that's because the award is most valuable player, not just offensive rookie of the year. If it was player of the year, then I wouldn't think it should just go to a quarterback. But it's MVP. Quarterbacks always have more value, right? So when value isn't a part of the equation, then I think it should go to who just played the best relative to their positional value. And to me, Nacua was better than CJ Stroud this season, and CJ Stroud missed time. So all that factoring in, listen, if Carter and Stroud both win the award, those would be two players worthy of an award. But to me, these are the two guys I would campaign for. And then Coach of the Year, listen, D'Amico Ryans has been great. It's not a knock on Ryans at all, but I get frustrated with the fact that it seems that Coach of the Year just goes to whichever team overperformed the most. Like, this is how Matt Nagy wins a Coach of the Year award. This is why Stefanski won his Coach of the Year award, even though he's turned out to actually be a pretty good coach. I think DeMeco Ryans is a good coach. I think he's going to be around for a while. I don't think this is the Matt Nagy situation, and I understand the logic in giving him Coach of the Year, but like Kyle Shanahan's team, we're legitimately saying that, well, if Brock Purdy goes down, I don't know, Sam Darnold might be able to do enough in the Shanahan scheme. They might still make it work. Like, we're legitimately saying that Sam Darnold could potentially play well because of the Shanahan scheme. We're, guys putting up historic numbers and no one cares because of the Shanahan scheme. And there's talent around him, of course, a lot of talent for Shanahan. But to me, I don't think there's been a coach better. I would say he deserves Coach of the Year, but it'll probably be DeMeco Ryans. And again, I'm not gonna be mad when DeMeco Ryans wins. This is just my pick. Offensive and defensive players of the year now. Christian McCaffrey feels like a lock. I think everyone's going to have him on their ballot. Not a lot to say there. Jesse Bates, though, is where the discussion is going to come in, where some people are going to agree, some people are going to disagree. Again, listen, TJ Watt and Myles Garrett have both been fantastic this season. You could campaign for either of them to win Defensive Player of the Year. But again, I don't agree that the Defensive Player of the Year should always go to an edge rusher. I think that there's plenty of positions, and what Jesse Bates has done this season for Atlanta has been nothing short of remarkable. I believe he has 6 interceptions this season, all while being a lockdown safety, being the kind of safety that you just don't throw to. Like, I haven't seen that since Ed Reed. I'm not saying he's as good as Ed Reed. I'm just saying, like, remember Ed Reed with Baltimore, teams just straight up like wouldn't throw it in his direction as a safety. We saw that with Jesse Bates this season. His value to that Atlanta team was unbelievable. He is, in my opinion, the best defensive player in 2023, but he plays a safety, so he's not going to really be in contention for the award, which I think is unfortunate. And MVP, the podcast didn't seem to mind this take, but I have a feeling the video only people might not love it as much. Every time I bring up the Josh Allen stuff, people get mad. And listen, the turnovers, I keep bringing this up. His turnover-worthy play rate is about the same as Lamar Jackson's. Like, they put the ball in harm's way about the same this season. So while Allen's overall turnovers have been high, and maybe you could argue that one of his turnovers is more, in a bad area than someone else's. Like, his turnovers look especially ugly. There's probably some truth to that. I went back and forth on this. I did. I don't just do hot takes to do hot takes. Trust me, not doing hot takes tend to, involve better, usually that actually gets more people to watch when I just give kind of the take that everyone agrees with. And also, I don't like people getting mad at me. I'm very sensitive. So usually I like to have non-hot takes. But again, I got to be honest about how I view things. I did go back and forth with Lamar and Josh Allen. At one point, I had Lamar written down in my notes before saying, no, I am going to go with Allen, just because I think when it's close, I'm going to give it to the guy who's in the worst situation. And I think Allen has accomplished more with less than, this season. With Lamar, he's been great, but he also does have a great defense. It is true, and that's part of why the record is what the record is. The reality is the Bills' offense has performed better than the Ravens' offense this season, with, in my opinion, a worse supporting cast around Josh Allen. And I'm not saying Lamar Jackson is, I'm not saying he's playing in San Francisco, right? Like, he does a lot with his roster as well. That's why, to me, those are the two guys. Even though Dak's played great this season, I would put him at 3. That's why Lamar and Allen are my top 2. But again, better offense, worse supporting cast, and I think Allen's been unlucky this season as well. So all that factoring in, I would give the nod to Josh Allen. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.